Oh, says we're live. Okay. We didn't change our start time. We were supposed to start at 6, but like I said, we were solving all the world's problems before we got started. I thought we did a pretty good job. We'll see how it works out tomorrow. Probably all the news stations will be turned off. We won't need them. We don't need them now, yeah. Yeah. All right. Get back in our lesson here. We've been talking about follow me. Follow me. Jesus' commission to follow him. And we've been looking at these different books, Hebrews, Colossians, Matthew, Mark, John. And I want to look at the book of Revelation today. Even though we've already done it, and I tell you, when I do these things, sometimes I go back and I think, well, you taught all those lessons on Revelation, and now you're going to get in. Are you going to have to change up or something, or modify it? But one of the things that you always see is things on multiple levels, I guess. And a lot of times there's different ways to look at it. But nothing is contrary to anything that we've taught before. But this follow me from the book of Revelation. Now, there was, in the Soviet Union, they were communists. They're no longer the Soviet Union. But they were communist, atheist, and they were at a big meeting, and this communist speaker said, there is no God, there is no Jesus, there is no Holy Spirit. The church is a oppressive institution. I think Marx, or one of them, said it was the opiate of the people. He says the church, that thinking is out of date. And he says the future belongs to the state, and the state is in the hands of the party. Now, there was an old priest there, and he stood up, and he said, may I say just 2 words? Now, it's 3 words in English, but they were speaking Russian. And here's what he said: Christ is risen. Christ is risen. And the crowd roared and cheered. I'm going to use this word today, Easter. It is in the Bible, but this Resurrection Day. And the thing that I don't think that we get, I was thinking about this coming up the road and yesterday a whole lot. The gospel message of Easter is the complete answer to tyranny. I mean, honestly, to all the problems that we were solving here for 45 minutes, Easter's the answer to it. And I was thinking, honestly, in my mind, I was planning for next Easter, what we did this previous year. I was thinking about some other preachers to invite and how to go. And I know and this is why I think we miss it, in our society, Christmas is the big deal. But in all of history, those 3 days is the biggest deal of all. I mean, I love Christmas. I mean, Christmas is great, but Easter changed everything. I mean, Easter ought to be the biggest week-long celebration there is. Instead of, everybody getting in the Christmas spirit, I wish they would get into the Easter spirit, because The resurrection is the answer. It's the answer to this tyranny. And the place in Scripture where that is clearest is the book of Revelation. And I can tell you, I've read Revelation so many times, and when I first got my Bible, I opened it up, and I done as I always do. I go to the end of the book, and I start reading it. A lot of people do that, and you know, I'm not pointing any fingers because I did it the same thing. Then I had all these questions. Maybe if I'd have read some of the other books to start with, but I've read it so many times, but you know, when you go read the Bible, it's like inside of it there's a hidden thunderstorm. Just, you know, I think it's awesome. I've never really been one to be scared, but sometimes that thunder can hit and you can feel it shake your pants legs and shake your house. And just for a moment, the awesomeness of God breaks through, and you know, the awe, the terror, the fear, the all of that just comes through. And that is hidden right inside of our Bible. And Easter is the most thunderous moment in the whole year. It's such a huge event that even the churches, we can't even cope with it. Honestly, that's why we have moved everything to Christmas, Valentine's Day, everything but Easter. We've scaled it down to fit our little minds, and we cope with it with chocolate eggs and little bunny rabbits because we can't deal with it. I mean, Paul is standing before King Agrippa and says, "Why do you think it a strange thing that God should raise the dead?" And King Agrippa says, "Enough with this conversation. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. Paul's lost his mind. We can't deal with it. We can deal with chocolate eggs and Easter bunnies and trunk or treats and all the other things, but God help us when we have to deal with Easter." We in the church, we've made Easter the source of our present spiritual life, and Jesus is alive today so I can have a personal relationship with Him. Hey, that's all true. That's wonderful, but it's not the full truth of Easter. You know, I guess that's why I get so aggravated sometimes. Well, it's just about relationship. Guys, it's more than that. Thank God for the relationship. Thank God you've been forgiven. Thank God for all of that. It's wonderful. But it is so much. It's bigger than your little relationship with the Lord. We've made it the ground of our future hope. Jesus' resurrection proves that there really is life after death. Think about that. Life after life beyond the grave. I mean, before that, we could just wonder, hey, will I really ever see my mom again? There's no proof. Well, there's proof now. And all of that is true, but when you scale that little hill, you haven't even got to the first base camp of Mount Everest. Easter isn't just about you and me and our present spiritual experience or our hope beyond the grave. It's the beginning of a brand new world. This idea, you know, the words New Age, so popular now, New Age. But as the world goes, most of the times, that's just a feeble parody of the reality. Which is this, that when Jesus burst out of that tomb on the first Easter morning, the history of the cosmos changed its course. That's when the real New Age began. I mean, Easter is the victory of the Creator over all evil. I mean, I just look at that verse in Hebrews, destroyed him that had the power of death. Destroyed him. I'm looking around, wait a minute. Destroyed him that had the... Easter is the victory of the Creator over all evil. It's the victory of the God of love over all tyranny. In all of the problems that we solve today, I was just thinking and just watching a little bit of news, and people are wondering, and they're talking about how we may get drug into the war in Israel and Iran and Lebanon and all the things, and the jockeying that's going on in North Korea and Ukraine and Russia and all of that. And you know, what is the answer? Resurrection is the answer. Resurrection of Jesus is the answer here. Because all of those things are based on what? Fear. And this is what we try to do. You shoot at me, and then I'll shoot you. And you kill us, and we'll kill you. It's over and over and over and over. That Easter, it declares that God is God, and that His kingdom shall come, and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Easter speaks of a world reborn. Now, if we're trying to come up with this, you know, we were talking there last week, you know, the sun is dark and the moon turned to blood, and kind of all of this language that we see it in Joel, we see some of this language in Isaiah. I mean, what kind of language are you really going to use to describe a brand new world reborn? I mean, something that would do justice to such a huge idea. Now, what kind of language do we have in the Bible? Thunder, lightning, earthquakes, tornadoes, devastating terror, and joy so rich and full that you could swim in it. See, I love that kind of language. You know, as Ezekiel will say, water to swim in. Water that could not be passed over. Now, some go into this book of Revelation and they treat it like a theological crossword puzzle, you know, checking this off, checking this off, checking this off. Who needs a crossword puzzle when you're faced with tyranny and love side by side? And I'm using this word a lot, tyranny. But, and I tell you what's been on my mind for a week and a half, and I'm really looking into it. I'm not going to go down this road. But as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man be lifted up. And just going back and thinking, you know, going back to that story, I thought it was in Numbers 24. It's Numbers 21, and just reading that story of Israel and the serpents biting them. And, you know, when you use these words that are so rich, thunders and lightnings and earthquakes, and, you know, that's why I was looking at these stories, the poetry that's in them, because you're trying to bring out what's there. You know, I've seen some, you know, I seen a train wreck one time up in Indiana, a head-on train collision in a town called LaPorte, Indiana. And at the time, I don't even think we had cell phones. If we did, they wasn't taking pictures. And you couldn't describe it. My language was inadequate to describe the devastation that I saw. So if we're going to talk this huge language, we've got to use these magnificent, horrible, joyful words. And the language is strange because it's from a different culture, and it's also strange because we in the modern West have made ourselves strangers to thunder and earthquakes and things of this nature, and terror and joy. The closest we get to any of that stuff is Hallmark, is TV, which what happens when you start to become a little bit too emotional? You can turn it off. I mean, I go back and I look at the Bible, and I mean, my gosh, I mean, the very stones would cry out. And if something happens in our life to allow terror or joy to break through and really hit us in the face, we can't handle it. We can't cope. You know, as Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. And we go off and have a drink and pretend it didn't really happen. It's too much. It's too much emotion. It's too much. We can't deal with it. But Easter is the time for revolution. If we're in danger of scaling down and trying to tame the gospel stories, Revelation will shake you out of that and expose some of our raw nerves to the terror and the joy of the living God. Now, I know you think, this is what I'm, when you tell people this, they're like, oh, no, God is love. Yeah, and there's no terror involved. I beg to differ. I beg to differ. When you get in a little bit of his manifest presence, I'm telling you, there's some weight and there's some terror involved. Yes, there is joy, but there is terror involved also. That's how I know when people has really been in their presence and when they're not, because they don't have that awe or that, Now, Revelation, I know you know these verses, begins with a vision of the risen Jesus. Let me just go over there. If I can find it here. Revelation. Now, remember, I'm reading this out of the NIV. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking with me. And after turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man, clothed in a robe, reaching to the feet, wrapped around the chest with a golden sash. His head and his hair were white like wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet burnished bronze when it had been heated to a glow in a furnace. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. And in his right hand he held 7 stars. And out of his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. I mean, that is awesome. Snow, white hair, eyes of fire, feet of polished bronze, voice like a waterfall, his face like the sun itself. No wonder John fell on his face as dead. This is where terror and joy meet. This is Easter Jesus. I mean, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, and he placed his right hand on me, and it says, "Fear not." You see? Fear not. Jesus says, I'm the first and I'm the last. I'm he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of hell and of death. I mean, that is huge right there. I have the keys of hell and of death. Whatever you've lost, whoever you've lost, whatever parts, whatever little bits of your life are locked away for sorrow and shame, I've got the keys. Just risen Jesus here. All the problems that we were talking about and all the little things, Jesus says, I've got the keys. I've got the keys of hell and of death. I've got them. See, tyrants base their power on their ability to kill. Whether it's the invisible tyrant of sin or the visible tyrants that stalk our world, still their power lies in the threat of death. They claim to have the keys of hell and of death. I mean, this is why I hear politicians say, we'll do this, we can do that. Oh, no. Jesus is rattling the keychain and said, you don't have no keys, I got them. Because they're lying. Where the tyrant's power runs out, God's power begins, because he raises the dead. Now, this vision of the risen Jesus serves as this magnificent structure of the book, something we need to keep in mind everywhere we go in this book. Now it has a second introduction. We went through this in our study of Revelation. 7 letters to 7 churches. John knew that these churches were facing the tyranny of sin and within, the tyranny of sin within and the tyranny of Rome without. And they were to hold firm to what? The risen Christ. And these 7 letters, they serve like a corridor, like a hallway that's leading us right to the throne room. Imagine that. Right to the very throne room itself. One of these days I'm going to be able to have a big pulpit where I don't have to do this. When John got to the end of that hallway, what did he see? John saw a door standing open in heaven. And I mean, Jesus is talking right there. The church, any man opens, I'll come in and sup with him and eat with me. I mean, this is Jesus who says, I am the door. And he sees this door standing open in heaven. And he went through it in the Spirit. And he saw the living God with all creation paying homage to him. Now, chapter 5, there's one on the throne that has a scroll in his hand, and it's sealed in the scroll. I go back and, like I said, you can look at these things 2 or 3 different ways here, but I go back to Jeremiah most often with this inheritance and salvation and all this. It's the plan of God. You know when it says to know God's will? That you might know the will of God. We'll talk about this later, but you know what we do with that? We do with this everything. We make it so little. We think, well, God's will for me. No, what is God's will? What is God's purpose? What is God's desire? God's desire is to renew this cosmos, and He began it in the person of Jesus. All things. Behold, I make a few things. Behold, I'm going to make the new church. Behold, I make all things new. Do what you want with that all things. I just happen to believe it's the all things. I'm going to make everything new. But it was sealed up, it was locked away. God's purpose, God's plan, the divine purpose for recreating the whole cosmos. See, when you understand, when you know what God's will is, His will is not put us on a spaceship and fly us to heaven. His will is new creation. And He's invited you and me to the party to participate in new creation. And somebody with this sealed scroll has got to open the scroll, but nobody can do it. And, I looked, and nobody in heaven and in earth or under the earth could take the scroll and open it up. It just could not happen. And what happened to John? He just began to weep, and he wept. And I got these highlighted right here because sometimes there's a couple words here and a couple words here, and sometimes there's words in between them. But in verse 6, look at verse 6, chapter 5, verse 6. And I'm going to read what I have highlighted. And I saw a lamb standing. I highlighted that. Now it says, and I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing. But I just highlighted because, John, and he's going through and he's looking and like, behold, this is a slaughtered lamb. Normally a slaughtered lamb is laying there, but this one is standing. Oh my gosh. This lamb, I saw a lamb standing. Here is this Easter message in vivid picture language. The Lion, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords has become a lamb, a sacrificial lamb, the Paschal lamb. And by His death, He has conquered the powers of evil, so that now the purpose of God, God's rescue operation for the whole cosmos, can be unrolled and put in dramatic operation. The strife is over. The battle is done. Now is the victor's triumph won. And the scene concludes with the song of praise being sung by every creature that exists. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. To me, not a lot of people like this, but I like not so much opera, but I do like a little bit of it, but I love symphony. And man, when that guy's going crazy and this one is coming in and then this one is coming in and this one's coming in and then they're all coming together, and man, it just makes my chest pump, and I say, golly. Imagine all of that, 1,000 lines being sung, all blending together, all creation into this huge swelling harmony. Every creature in heaven, and on earth, penguins and gorillas and dogs and birds, as well as children and women and men, all singing this extraordinary song. That's how Easter is celebrated in God's dimension of reality, you see. And He's invited us to come to His table and celebrate this with Him. But we say, no, we would rather celebrate Christmas, or we would rather celebrate Halloween or Thanksgiving or 4th of July, the birth of a nation. And He says, man, was the nation really born in a day? Join me in my celebration. What we Christians do on earth is to add our line to that total harmony. We celebrate together the fact of a world reborn. Now I'm going to go over here to John's Gospel, John chapter 20. Notice the classic effect of the Easter message, John chapter 20. Verse 11, but Mary was standing outside of the tomb, weeping so as she wept. She stooped and looked into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been laid. And they said unto her, Woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have put him. And when she had said this, again, I highlighted this. She turned and saw Jesus standing. What did John see? John saw Jesus standing. What does Mary see? Saw Jesus standing. But she did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? Thinking that he was the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher. Mary, weeping outside of the tomb, stands for all of us. And she is weeping bitterly, weeping for herself, yes, weeping for her Lord, yes, but also in her tears, weeping for the hope of Israel, because Jesus was the very hope of Israel. The very hope of Israel that had been cruelly crushed by tyranny, and in that, for the hope of the whole world, snuffed out by the power of the world, because he was it. And you know what? Mary weeps on today. Mary is weeping in Ukraine, and Mary is weeping in Palestine, and Mary is weeping in Iran and in Israel and in Russia and in the inner cities in Chicago and New York and Mexico and in the broken homes all over, and places like in rich lands and Lebanon and all over, and in the hearts and lives of Christians who suffer with their Lord here and now. Mary still weeps. But on that Easter morning, Jesus calls Mary by name and asks, Why are you weeping? Why are you weeping? He calls us by name, calls us with a voice that is like the sound of many waters, a voice which goes through us. It goes through our defenses that we've used so that we don't have to cope with the terror and the joy that we've put up to keep it all out. And he calls us with a voice which we recognize, calls us with a love which is stronger than death. And he says to us, fear not. I am the first and I'm the last. I'm he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of hell and of death. And as Mary met the living Jesus on Easter morning, so the weeping John discovers, because John was weeping, and he saw the Lamb standing. John discovers that the Lion, who is the Lamb, has conquered, and he can open the scroll. And as the scroll is opened, so the book of Revelation proceeds, and in its own amazing picture language, to work out that cosmic victory of the Lamb over all evil, even death itself. What's the last enemy? Easter is all about the wiping away of tears. And in our fear of terror and our fear of joy, we have forgotten the purpose of tears. Somehow we've become embarrassed by the tears, and with good reason, since they're a God-given reminder of the truth which our culture has done its best to make us forget. That we aren't apes that have evolved. That we are not angels in training, but we are human beings, people, human beings made in the image of God. Which God? The God who stood and wept at the tomb of his friend, and who fell and wept in the Garden of Gethsemane. If Good Friday and Easter don't stir our emotions, then the tyrant has indeed enslaved us. And we've become, it's like a garden paved with stones. And you know, many, as we were talking about earlier, many even choose it, rather than face the terror and the joy of our own hearts, let alone Calvary and Easter. But Easter is all about the garden in which those paved stones are made to look silly. I mean, Jesus weeps at Lazarus' tomb, but it doesn't end there, does he? Lazarus, come forth. He calls him out of death into life. Jesus weeps in Gethsemane, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Oh, I sorrow even to death. But then he goes off to confront the tyrant and defeat him. Peter weeps bitterly after he denies Jesus, and the risen Jesus meets him and loves him and commissions him. Mary weeps before Jesus' tomb, and Jesus meets her alive. John weeps because the purpose of salvation is sealed up and the world can't be rescued from the tyrant. And his tears turn to worship because the Lamb is there standing, the Lamb who was slain. Now we can try paving the garden with stone. Become springtime, I love it. Life is coming forth. I'm telling you, I don't care what you do. I look out there on the railroad and I see all that stone and them trains and how hard that ground is, and they still, life just burst right up through it. It's coming. And I look around sometimes and I laugh and I think, y'all will do everything to try to stop life, but it's coming, and I don't care how many times you spray that ground, you can salt that ground, but I read anywhere this water goes, life is happening. You just can't stop it. And you know, Mary didn't really make a mistake because she thought Jesus was the gardener, the true Adam. But what then is this full hope which Easter unveils? The middle chapters of Revelation lead up to this great victory of the Lamb over that city, Babylon, the tyrannous city that has opposed God and his loving purposes. Then in the last two chapters, we find the vision of the new city which takes the place of Babylon. And it's the Easter vision of a world reborn. Let me go over here. Revelation chapter 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne. See, we just read a loud voice. But these are booming voices saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, is among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be among them, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there will no longer be any death, and there will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. And he who sits on the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And he said, write, for these words are faithful and true. Now, which way's the city going? It is coming down. And I'll say this, and we'll talk about this more as we go on into this lesson, not today. I know you mentioned one of those videos, but God's people, to be sure, go to heaven. When they die, they pass into God's dimension of reality, and we see them no more. But Easter unveils the truth even of heaven. The truth that God's kingdom shall come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And our ultimate destiny is not a disembodied heaven, just as the ultimate destiny of this created world is not to be thrown away, blown up, burned up. It's new creation, it's recreation, it's reborn. That's the will of God. The truth of Easter unveils the fact that the whole world is to be reborn. New heavens, new earth, married together. That is our destiny. That's the world's destiny. All because of Easter. The closest that you and I come to this destiny in the present, now we come close to it, is in the Eucharist. We anticipate the heavenly marriage feast, the symbols of creation, the bread and the wine, and they are shot through with heaven and with God's dimension and with the life and love of the Lamb. And in this new heaven and new earth, there are several things that will have no more place there, no more barbed wire there, no bombs, no bullets, no concentration camps. None of that stuff. Revelation has its own list of what won't be there. No temple. Who needs one when you have the living presence of God, the personal presence of God? No sea there. The sea is where the evil comes from in the book. No sin, nothing that corrupts and defaces the human reflection of the living God. No death, no mourning, no pain. The tyrant's weapons will be all gone, and God himself will wipe away all the tears from all eyes. Yes, Mary, your tears will be dried. Peter, yours too. John, yours too. Your tears are no longer needed now that the scroll is open. And Jesus' own tears before Lazarus' tomb, Jesus' own tears in Gethsemane are all swallowed up in joy, joy unspeakable. The tears of the Ukrainian widows and the Russian widows and the Rwandan orphans and the abandoned lovers, the bitter people who've lost their jobs and their homes and all of that. And I remember that song, Elvis, another little baby child is born in the ghetto. And that song, old Mac Davis, I think, wrote it. All the tears we cry in secret, wiped away. And it's all, why? It's all because of the Lamb. And here is John's contribution to this biblical picture of cross and resurrection. Here is his vision of the Jesus who summons us in awe and joy to follow him. Jesus is the one with eyes of fire, the voice like many waters, who died but is now alive forevermore. Then he's the Lion of Judah, the Messiah who becomes the Paschal Lamb, the sacrificial Lamb, who by his own blood defeated evil and rescued humans and the world from its tyranny. And now at the end of the story, he's the bridegroom, the one for whom we've longed without even knowing it. You know, when you look, the world is longing for him and they don't even know it. You know, I used to, I never knew the answers because, you know, sometimes you could ask your kids, what's the matter? I don't know. You ever had that answer? And you know, the world, we look and we see, there's a longing in your heart. And you don't even know. You ask them what the problem is. I don't know. I don't really have a problem. But there's a longing in their heart. It's just been so packed away and so tucked away deep, deep, deep. Because we were made for him whose love for us is like the brightness of the sun. I mean, think about that. Who's like the sun itself. And we were made for him. All our earthly loves are like just reflecting moons. It cannot even compare. The wrath of the Lamb is the anger of love against all that hurts and damages the beloved. The love of the Lamb is the great reality that undergirds this whole vision. And it is that love which is revealed in Easter. Without Easter, Calvary was just another political execution of a failed Messiah. Without Easter, the world is trapped between the shoulder of the cynic and the fantasy of the escapist and the tanks of the tyrants. Without Easter, there's no reason to suppose that good will triumph over evil. You see, the escapists don't believe it. They don't believe that it can. They don't believe that it will. We got to get out of here and let the devil, We are those who say, no, love will win. The kingdom will come and Christ will be all and in all. And all things will be born. How do you know this? Easter. Easter. That's how we know. Easter. Love will triumph over hatred. Love will conquer death. But with Easter we have hope because hope demands or hope depends on love. And love has become human and has died and is now alive forevermore. And love himself holds the keys of hell and of death. And it's because of him that we know. We don't just hope. We know that God will wipe away all tears from all eyes. And in that knowledge, we find ourselves to be Sunday people. We're Sunday people. Called to live in a world full of Friday people. What happens on the Friday? All the tears are on Friday. All the mourning. The tyrants seem to have victory, and they took love and crucified him. We're Sunday people living in a world full of Friday people. And in that knowledge, we know ourselves to be Easter people called to minister to a world full of Calvaries, to a world full of death and destruction. And in that knowledge, we find that the hand that dries our tears passes the cloth to us and bids us to follow him. To go dry one another's tear. The Lamb bids us to follow. These are they that follow the Lamb whithersoever he goes. Even in the dark places of the world, even into the dark places of our own hearts. See, it's easier to go into the inner cities in Chicago than to go right in here. The places where the tears blot out the sun. The places where the tyrants pave the grass with concrete And he bids us shine his morning light into the darkness and share his ministry of wiping away the tears. And as we worship, and as we awe, and as we adore, and as we follow the Lamb, we join already in the song of Revelation that you see sung over there. The song that one day the trees and the mountains and the wells and the waterfalls and the birds and the whole world reborn on Easter morning will all sing together. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and power forever and ever. Amen. Follow me. I'll quit with that.